Hare Krishna, everyone. Haribol to all the listeners. Welcome to our channel, which is called First and Foremost, or Important Channel. We discuss important topics amongst devotees, and I'm your host. My name is Dinabandhu Das. And today I invited Chaitanya Chandrodaya Prabhu to our channel, and we will have very important discussion on the topic of war in Ukraine. Welcome, Chaitanya Chandrodaya.
Hare Krishna. I hope you can hear me. Is the connection
Yes,
okay?
sound is good.
Okay, well, I agreed to talk to you about the war in Ukraine, not just because I am from Ukraine, but also because I met so many devotees in recent months who have quite a few misconceptions and rather bizarre ideas about the war in Ukraine. And they range from complete fakes to indifference to conspiracy theories, which kind of make me wonder, where did they get this information from? And that's just to give you a summary, what is happening in Ukraine. 10 devotees are dead from the incoming fire from the Russian side or from missiles. Also, several temples are damaged. One temple in Kherson area has been recently liberated. Devotees don't dare going there because it's fully mined around the area and it's being shelled by the Russian side from the other side of the river. So the temple was occupied by the Russian soldiers who messed it up completely. They wouldn't let devotees even to remove paraphernalia from the temple, worship paraphernalia. So they used it as their barracks. And now it's in a complete mess, but you cannot even go there to see. It's a Kherson temple, one of the largest South Ukrainian temples, which was occupied for a while.
Yeah, so both of us, myself and Chaitanya Chandrodaya, we are native Ukrainians. Things happen that Chaitanya Chandrodaya is in Belgium now, in Radadesh temple. He was forced to move there with his family, with 2 young children. So he was there actually in Ukraine when the war started in February this year. We have our friends, relatives staying back in Ukraine, and we're getting first-hand information from devotees in Ukraine. So we can share some inside information, what's actually happening there. And also we can share our experience with dealing with devotees in English-speaking communities, how they react on the whole situation. And also we would discuss how the authorities of our Hare Krishna movement society or ISKCON reacting on this war and how it's being discussed amongst the devotees. First question I would like to ask you, Chaitanya Chandrodaya, can you give just overall view what happened between Russia and Ukraine before the open war in February? I'm talking about annexation of Crimea and Donbas region.
Okay, skipping past all the history of colonization of the time when Ukraine was, by all means, a colony similar to what Ireland was to Great Britain, and skipping to somewhere 2009 years ago, actually sharp 9 years ago. That's the time when Russia started losing control, which used to be quite extended, control over Ukraine as the addendum to Russian territory. They started using control over the culture, over the political forces, and the control over the economy of Ukraine. And a war, an invasion, which started in 2014, saw part of Ukraine being taken over. It's Crimea. Crimea is Russian-speaking part of Ukraine with a history of genocide against local population. So Tatars who used to live there for centuries and centuries and centuries in a quite a traditional lifestyle. They were moved out by Stalin after the war, and
You're talking about Second World War, right?
Second World War. Yes, that's right. After the Second World War, they were moved out in huge numbers off to certain areas of, well, Siberia, basically. Together with Greek population and with indigenous Ukrainians, they were kind of sidelined and moved out, and a lot of Russian-speaking people were brought in from very similar way to what you see in the Northern Ireland, where there were Catholics and then the Protestants were brought from Scotland some few hundred years ago. So then there was an illegal referendum. In Russia, they think it was perfectly legal to bring out, all the machine guns and put them at the election points and make everybody vote for joining the great Russian Empire, Russian Federation. And basically that was one part of the war, and second part was the eastern Ukraine, guns for hire, mercenaries, and also professional SEALs were used to take over some eastern regions of Ukraine, and shelling started, which continued for quite a while. Eastern Ukraine, an independent, in the brackets, part, separatists, they were shelling Ukrainian territories, and there was a tit for tat between the two armed forces for a while, for actually quite a while. Not much, hardly any casualties on civilian side, but there was quite a lot of infighting, which continued on and on in a small scale until February 2022, when I woke up and I saw black smoke in front of my window, and that was a rocket hitting a nearby building.
So I just want to interrupt you for a second. Is Chaitanya Chandra, he's from Odessa, which is a southern part of Ukraine on the Black Sea. I'm from Kharkiv city, which is
I mean, compared to Kharkiv, we are quite far from the border, so we didn't get as much fire as you did. I mean, it's hard to compare, but basically the whole atmosphere, it was really traumatic from many reasons, not just because some shelling, and also because of the constant need to go to bomb shelters and to provide for screaming, anxious children who are like suffering from this terrible anxiety, because they cannot understand what is war, but can feel it. They can feel it, and they kind of like express this huge anxiety and unsettledness, and it's actually on the borderline for many children. It's not borderline, it's actually reality. It's mental problem that they have to phase out in their life. And I'm talking about 8,000 devotees who had to be moved from one place to another. Thousands emigrated to Europe. and 10 devotees died in result of this war. And now, there is very little you hear in the media, and especially in ISKCON media, about what is going on in Ukraine. There are reasons for that. And some reasons are really hard to understand. Have you heard anything, any details about devotees and temples in Ukraine in recent, say, couple months? Have you heard? I mean,
No,
in
I
English,
haven't.
in
I
Ukrainian
haven't.
and in Russian, we hear it.
Some devotees were mentioning this conflict, and of course they were sympathizing to Ukrainian devotees, sending love and support. But there is no coverage for what's actually going on for 9+ months now in Ukraine, and that's actually very sad that ISKCON authorities do not cover this situation enough, so devotees
Well,
in the West can
personally
get the
heard
information.
something. I heard a stream by Niranjana Maharaj, who went to
Yes, that
Ukraine.
was the recent one.
Yeah, that was the
Yeah.
recent one. Yeah, so there was some information, and the basic gist was that a lot of money being collected, lots of donations connected, especially for generators and for food, for facilities, for devotees who moved around and who have low facilities in Ukraine. In recent power shortages because of the attacks, I mean, those generators will be very handy, but most of the devotees that I contacted in Ukraine, they were in a desperate situation and very positive. Oh, we don't have any electricity, and I cannot charge my phone. We are okay, but that basically means it's just very positive. But it basically means that the heating system will not work, and that they will have no way to even inform if anything happens to them. But
In
it's
Kharkiv,
hard
they
to
have
understand
only
the
2
scale
hour
of this
2 hour
because
a
it's not
day.
just yeah.
Electricity is on only 2 hours a day, basically.
Well, some people report that they had electricity for 6 hours, but that's rare. Yeah, so 3 to 2 hours, that would be what is happening now. This is like, I mean, if you have children and if you have a family, or if you have some sort of attempt to earn a living, it's unbelievably little. It's basically means that most of people who are dependent on electricity for heating will freeze to death or be suffering tremendously in the
We
coming
need to
couple of
remind
months.
that winter is coming in Ukraine, and winter
Well,
in
it's already
Ukraine,
there. That's the whole
yeah,
thing. I
it's
mean,
already
I
there.
know for you, you need a reminder because you're somewhere there on the down south side of the globe. But for here in Europe, it's already winter, and in Ukraine, it's already -2, -3 centigrade. Basically, it's a freezing temperatures, and it's scary. It is really scary. Some devotees just don't come to call you or talk to you because there is no way to contact anymore. That's scary, actually. So a couple of things are also scary is the fact that a whole contingent of Russian, in the brackets, devotees. We know that devotees are not Russian, not Ukrainian. They are all, devotees of Krishna. But those who identify with Russian patriotic uh, uh, drive, they feel that this, and I'm talking about regular devotees and some leaders, they feel that this attack is justified and that it is needed. It's part of, and that's unbelievable, part of some sort of spiritual golden age coming. Before golden age is coming, you need to kill all the demons, and Ukrainians are obviously demons. They're supporting the West, and Prabhupada said in the books that the West is the degraded place where you cannot really do anything except preach the holy name and distribute books. Otherwise, it's a place for Kali. So basically, this philosophy is being used as if Russia is not the West. I mean, that's probably the most degraded part of the West. But there's some sort of very strange philosophy that is being propagated by quite a few leaders, sannyasis, and one temple president, I know he would be so strongly anti-Ukrainian that he would say that it's not enough to kill Ukrainians. You need to kill all the children of Ukraine because they're bearing the same almost antichrist kind of blood.
Who said that?
Well, I'm not going to name the name. It's a disaster. I mean, they took him down from the position of temple president, and I'm delighted about that. But the whole mood or drive is that at least one sannyasi is being investigated by sannyas ministry. And well, that's as far as I know. Maybe there are more, but as far as I know, one sannyasi is being investigated. One sannyas candidate will probably be investigated because he's promoting the conscription drive. He's saying, that's dharma, you have to defend your country. That's the dharma of the land. And our holy president, Mr. Putin, suggested that we should help killing Ukrainians. We should help invading the neighbors because we need to save them from the, whatever NATO, whatever, reasons they give. So because of this, all you Russian devotees, they need to go to army,
Yeah, recently ISKCON leaders in Russia, they released a video where they insist on the fact that devotees should go to war because of that stupid mobilization being announced by Putin, and they said that that's the duty of devotee, go and fight.
Well, what I heard is slightly different.
Defeating the Russia.
One GBC for Russia was saying, if you can get out of it, you better get out of it because, it's not necessarily a best thing for devotees. So you have to see whether you are eligible for the civil service instead, or you can escape it by health reasons. And another GBC is like, no, this is dharma. We have to fight for Putin. It's unbelievable because it basically means they're asking them to commit what is already recognized crimes against humanity and basically go forward and take part in the collective rape, which is a fact, and collective murder of peaceful residents of Ukraine. In an unprecedented scale under false pretenses. And the false pretenses are usually like this. And that's what I heard from the mouths of people who are in the list of initiating gurus. I'm not saying they're gurus, but that's certainly not my gurus. But they project this idea. So where were you for 8 years when the Ukrainians were shelling Donbass area?
And that's the most famous one, like Russian-speaking residents in the Donbass have been subjected to genocide.
Kind of where were we? Okay. And then the question is, you don't remember what we were saying in our newspapers about losses on each side? You don't remember this? It was in every newspaper for at least 2 years when the shelling was going on. And the losses on Ukrainian unoccupied territory were greater than the losses on the Donbass territory. Now, and another thing is to understand that it was tit for tat shelling, which is normal in any military conflict. And the fact that we, or I would say we Ukrainians evacuated population from the Ukrainian side, protecting them from shelling. On the Donbass side, they just said, oh yeah, keep on living in Donetsk. We don't need to evacuate. You just stay there. And, it's just 3 kilometers from the line of fire. So yeah, keep going, keep living here. That's our capital. And so instead of evacuating everybody from there, they kind of almost used it as some sort of a negotiating tactic. And the fact that they're using this claims of genocide in Donetsk area are just so false. They're unbelievably false, because nobody ever created any situation of genocide. The only thing I heard of is that people there just a bit lazy. They don't want to study Ukrainian language for some reason. Like here in Belgium, everybody studies French and Dutch, but there they said, oh no, they're not gonna study this Ukrainian language. We only study Russian language. So that's a bit of that's the reality of it. They just don't like it. And that's the reason for the war. Well, the actual reason for the war, my personal opinion, is that there is a lot of Soviet era old missiles and all equipment that it's rotting there in Russian storages. And they figured, okay, well, that's the only way to use it. Let's use it in Ukraine. And that's the only real reason for the war, because there is no other reason except that everything else is just kind of like a build-up propaganda. Unbelievable, actually, unbelievable. Most of the arguments are just unbelievable. Anyway, the situation is like that there is hardly any coverage of what is happening in Ukraine by ISKCON media, and there are a couple of reasons for that. As far as I know, Ukrainian lobby is very small on the GBC level. There is a huge Russian-speaking and Russian by origin or by language lobby in the GBC. And we are talking about a couple of GBC members, a few sannyasis, and a few leaders who would stop press releases, except for the one in March. They would stop all press releases about what is actually happening in Ukraine. Some Ukrainian authorities are guilty of that as well. They think that if you don't say it too much, it's going to be better than if you say it too much. But reality is that many devotees are feeling so hurt and so left behind by this, and feel like, what, does it mean that we are just there to be, amalgamated into some sort of post-Soviet contraction under the religious premises, and that's something that they kind of don't like. But nobody wants to go back to the Soviet times. And the reality is that what happens now in the Soviet Union part, which is called Russia now, Russian Federation and Belarus, is that everything goes back to the Soviet ways of doing things, without dependence on the West, in the direct confrontation to the West, with support of nations who are in direct opposition to United States. For example, Iran, North Korea, and Belarus. That would be the three main parts of the foreign forces that support that invasion of Ukraine. And can you imagine the Krishna consciousness in Iran and North Korea, how that's developed now? I mean, that's what you will see, approximately what will happen in the Russian Federation after a year or two. They already, for many years, they're trying, and there were several court cases to ban Bhagavad Gita as it is, specifically our Bhagavad Gita, as not sectarian, but I mean, sectarian, that would be a mild way to put it, as a propaganda of violence, and thus making, devotees already for several years, they cannot just go out on the street and sing harinams. You need to get special permission, and that's usually quite restricted in the peripheral areas. It's only allowed in certain parts of Russian Empire, and majority of people cannot just go out and sell books anymore. And what I understand, that they cannot even talk about the fact that they have some sense of solidarity with Ukrainian devotees who are suffering, obviously, in the war. No, in the Russian side, they're not bombed or shelled everything happens in Ukraine. All who are suffering are Ukrainian devotees. So, and on top of it, our friends, supposedly those who should give us hand of support and um, maybe understanding, some form of understanding of what's going on, they um, send us very, very strange messages, like, why are you fighting back? You should just stop fighting back, because then the war will stop. Kind of strange logic.
And I've heard one devotee, he was quoting Prabhupada saying, if intruder comes to your house, you just need to give whatever
Yeah,
they
it's
want.
one of
And
those
that,
fake quotes. Yes, um, fake quotes from Prabhupada. Prabhupada would never said that. He said any aggressor, intruder should be killed, or that's his. He was never a pacifist. And a lot of people trying to project Prabhupada as a pacifist, but he was not. He certainly did not encourage people to go in and fight a war of aggression. For example, he didn't encourage devotees to go and fight in Vietnam. And that was a war of aggression. It was a war. Okay, it was aggression on both sides, but at least one power was a colonial power, and another power was trying to have some sort of normal independent state of Vietnam. They was getting support from the Soviet forces, and the pilots were Soviet pilots, and planes were Soviet planes. Having said that, Prabhupada did not support American soldiers going and invading some other country. In this case, Prabhupada would never support an invasion and destruction of a neighboring country just because they're lazy to learn Ukrainian language. It's just like, wow. I mean, I didn't learn Ukrainian language until I was something like 45, but that's fine because and it's evolving language, very rich language. There's a lot of dialects and lots of forms, but I mean, just because you don't want to learn another language is just unbelievable. And it looks like there is a few attitudes among devotees to the war. One is that it's an bodily conception of life. If you think yourself Ukrainian, you're obviously on the bodily conception of life. But if you think yourself Russian, that's not bodily conception. That's a spiritual conception, because Russian is a spiritual power, like a spiritual superpower. That's a mythology that is being produced now. uh, and just to support one thing, and I find it's quite amusing. The one thing that is being supported is that, as if it is in a scripture, that if you have a president and his name is Putin, you need to support him. And considering that he is, by all qualifications, are no better than Kamsa, in no way, and in many ways he's worse.
our
So
listeners would be surprised to learn that actually some devotees said that they think that Putin is the incarnation of Hanumanji.
yeah,
Can you
well, I mean,
believe this?
this is just like one of those
That's
unbelievable
just
things.
beyond
Well,
comprehension.
I saw
That
one
that
devotee
goes so
giving another
far.
devotee a T-shirt with Putin on it, and they have like a great hug. He gave me such a great present. The T-shirt with Putin, and I'm not talking about a devotee who's like 2 years in the movement. Somebody who's been around. I mean, there is no way devotees can just have T-shirts with political leaders on them and think it's spiritual. Nobody goes around with a T-shirt of Zelensky. I mean, I know some devotees who are fighting for Ukraine because it is Dharma. They don't support Zelensky as a president, but they support the fact that you cannot just go on somebody else's house and steal their wealth, steal their wife, and pretend it's your house now. It's like in that joke that is quite popular. I moved into my neighbor's apartment and decided that at least 3 rooms should belong to me. When they protested, I said, if you're gonna say something, I will blow up the whole apartment building. So that's what actually happens now, you know. Uh, and
That's not
there's the
a funny
spiritual.
joke.
Sorry.
That's not a funny joke.
I know it's not a funny joke because that's reality. That's reality, and it's reality of Russian foreign policy among many of the parts that they gradually grab, and land grabs are quite significant because all neighboring countries there in a in a kind of like a panic actually. As Finland wants to join that NATO, and it's
Sweden want to
unbelievable
join
because they were
NATO.
neutral for so many years. After winning the war from Soviet Union in 1945, they won the war uh, against Soviet Union, but uh, they were neutral. Sweden were neutral. I mean, they were so neutral, just like Austria or something, or Switzerland. But now they don't want to be neutral because they know that in a policy of Russian empire is to expand, and the Russian empire expands and expands and expands, and usually it's to the east. All Siberia. That's the part of the colonial kind of acquisitions of Russian empire, and they're moving towards east now um, because of geopolitical ambitions, really. Not just geopolitical ambitions, also some sort of pseudo spiritual ambitions. And there's a whole conspiracy theories um, that devotees subscribe, and those conspiracy theories connected to the world government and some forms of the only opposition to this evil elite of the world is the Russian President Putin. I heard it from Western devotees. Scary. Another uh, little bit of a conspiracy happening is because of ISKCON communications. For many years, they were supporting uh, Russian views, and many they're connected to the Russian sources, Russian members of the different subcommittees of GGBC, and they kind of have a wrong perspective on the war. So they decided to be absolutely neutral, you know, saying we don't support Russia, we don't support Ukraine, we just support those who are suffering. Of course, if you think a little bit, who are suffering as a result of this war? Are Ukrainian people, so you have to support Ukrainians. But they wouldn't even say that. They would say it's too sectarian to suggest we have to support Ukrainians. We just, support idea that you have to give to somebody who is suffering because of the war, just in case, uh, we don't know how the war will turn out, and maybe somebody will suffer in Russian Federation as a result of our communications. So we better have no communications. that's really what happens now.
Oh, on the other
But
hand, I heard from a very senior devotee, sannyasi, who can speak Bengali and Hindi. In his recent lecture, it's actually not recent, it was given a few months ago, he said that there's nothing special about this war. Devotees should not talk about this war because it will pass, as
yeah,
everything passes in this life, and
yeah,
no one will remember it. So as devotees, we only should be focused on Krishna Katha,
yeah,
and we shouldn't discuss anything like this. And he was actually quite cynical, comparing this war to demarcation of Afghanistan a century ago. And I when I
Afghanistan or
heard
India?
this, Afghanistan
Okay.
by English government or whatever.
Yeah, well, yes, that was one of the lost wars of Afghanistan in England. Um, I personally, I don't know how you feel. I personally that feel that senior sannyasis they should refrain from having political views, especially if these views are so weird or so um, unbecoming to a sannyasi. When children and women are killed we have rapes of 4-year-olds recorded by the Russian forces from 4 to 86. These are the range of the age of victims of sexual assaults and rape in Ukraine. And these are serious crimes against humanity. I think sannyasis should be very, very careful not to speak much about it.
Well, in this particular case, Sannyasi was hoping that this conflict will be over soon. And he said,
Okay.
who Ukraine is to fight with Russia. He said probably Russia will take over very soon, so don't
Yeah.
worry much about
That's one
anything.
of those misunderstandings about Ukraine, based on the fact that there is an overestimation of the power of Russian Empire, numerical or economical strength. And now, Ukraine traditionally was the best part of the Soviet army. Ukrainian front was taking Berlin. Ukrainian forces were for centuries, were the best gun for hire in Europe. That was 16th century, 17th century, even up to 12th century. These were the best. And I'm not going to go into history of Karmeluks or, but just to give you a little glimpse, there are several hundreds of years that Ukrainian origin forces were ruling India, along with Egypt and many other parts. They were all converts to Islam, but originally from Ukrainian blood. And up to 16th century, Marmeluks were ruling India for being quite a powerful type of fighters. And now Ukraine shows this to the world that there is a huge potential there in the Kshatriya spirit. Very professional Kshatriyas are there, and a lot of support from all over the world, except I would say that people are a little ignorant about Ukraine in general. I mean, I was surprised, but I came here, and one of those. Most of the people are careful; they figured out by now what is going on. But one Indian came to me and said, "Oh, where are you from?" I said, "I'm from Ukraine." I said, "Oh yeah, it's war is going on. So you're Russian, right?" And I said, "No, I'm not Russian." And I don't think anybody should be calling yourself Russian these days. And he said, "No, but you speak Russian, so you're Russian." So the truth is that in Ukraine we speak so many languages. In my town we have people who speak
Yiddish,
Yiddish, Greek. We have Italians were emigrated after revolutions,
Tataric language.
but originally all founding fathers were speaking Italian, French, of my town at least, and one of the languages is Russian, yeah, but it's not the only one, and it's certainly not anymore a dominant language in Ukraine. So we have to remember that, and remember that any bodily identifications are kind of quite limiting status at least. But my main concern is that people should understand that actually Ukrainian devotees are huge in number. It's not a small part, and proportionately much larger than Russian ISKCON in Ukraine. So 12, 14,000 people coming for a festival from Ukraine alone, just in recent years. And that means we have about 35,000 devotees, practicing devotees in Ukraine. I'm not talking about former devotees, quite a large number of former devotees, but practicing devotees, we have quite a large number. And we really need to pay attention of how we frame, how we present it, and give support, not just in terms of money. I mean, money is very important, and the fact that so many people give donations is really important. But the fact that we do support their fight, we support the justice against the aggressor. This is quite important. This is not the last thing. That's something that goes a long way for many devotees, and they're really anxious to see this expression. In fact, any comment will be much appreciated. And if you subscribe to the channel, we'll try to give you updates in English regularly. And at the time, there is a whole donation drive going on. I don't know if you'll put it in the comments, links to the
Yes,
sites.
yeah, I'll put it as a link so devotee
Yeah.
can actually donate some money towards helping their brothers and sisters in Ukraine to
Yes.
survive during those hard times. So
And
I'll
also
place the link
any
below.
expressions of support against this kind of philosophical justification of the war, like, okay, that's your karma, Prabhus, Matajis, children, infants. That's your karma that you get Russian rockets. No, that's not our karma. It's a karma of those who produce those rockets and send them here. They will suffer from this karma. And also other justifications, such as, there is a greater spirituality in Russian world, therefore, Ukraine has to give in and surrender as soon as possible, because otherwise, the golden age is not coming. Putin is not going to take over the universe. Well, that's going to be a big problem, isn't it? No, I'm telling you, Putin is almost finished. I asked the controlling deity of Russian Empire that he lost so much. He completely. There is no politician in the world who so much made a mistake, such a huge mistake. It's like unbelievable mistake. The claim was in 3 days we will be in Kiev, and from there on, it's 3 days and 3 days and 3 days. It's already 9 months, and by that time he should already realize that he is not winning this war. And the sannyasi who was under impression that Russian war machine is so powerful that will take over Ukraine should actually refrain from saying stupid things, because it's not going to be an easy. It's not going to be an easy war for Russia, and I think we have to be concerned mainly with what to do with those Russian devotees who are under influence of this propaganda, and how to help them, how to basically bring them out actually from Russia. Because one devotee, he escaped, and many devotees actually escaped through Georgia, some from Kazakhstan. They're escaping, going to India, going to the West, trying to find a place where you can safely practice Krishna consciousness, because it's not anymore safe in Russia. If it's not safe in Ukraine because of the Russian rockets, in Russia it's not safe because any minute KGB, which is now called FSB, are gonna roll out a new wave of, so to speak, same things that were happening in the 80s, when devotees were put in prison and jailed, or put in psychiatric hospitals because they were
they have a label, Western agent,
yes,
something like that. So
foreign
and they
agent, foreign
tiny
agent,
they
yeah,
foreign agent, right?
yes.
So they just pass the latest update. So if you announce to be a foreign agent, you can't vote in the country. You can't express any
You
opinion
cannot publish
openly.
anything. You cannot sell any
Can publish.
publication.
You can
Yeah.
teach, and that will be spread all the Russia very quick.
Yeah.
So
Russia has
everyone
official religions,
who thinks differently
yeah,
will be the foreign agent.
official indigenous religions, and everybody else are always from the common. From before communist time, from the Tsar time, if you were Russian Orthodox but didn't belong to the organization of Russian Orthodox Church, and there were hundreds of thousands of those who didn't accept the organization of Russian Orthodox Church, you were prosecuted until 1905, when you were again legal being an Orthodox. You say Ukrainian Orthodox or old style Orthodox, you were illegal in Russia. And in Russian Empire, the three main religions are Islam, this very KGB style Orthodox religion of Christianity, and very quiet, very under informed Buddhism, which is a large community on the eastern part of the empire on the border with Mongolia and China, which are basically the indigenous Buddhist territories. So these three religions are official religions, and Hinduism is never was an official religion. And in fact, Prabhupada, when they came to Soviet Union in 71, he said, don't build temples here. I mean, just get together in the apartments, because these people will not allow the temples to happen. Anyway, I just gave you some synopsis of the or updates of the situations, and I hope you have some better, clear understanding, and you can voice your support to defense of Dharma. In fact, defense of Dharma is essential part of Vaishnava philosophy as well. And when somebody comes into your house, doesn't matter what language they speak, doesn't matter what language you speak, doesn't matter what they say, doesn't matter what you say. If they come to your house, grab your children, grab your property, try to kill them or kill you. Basically, they're called aggressors, atyani, and they are to be punished. That's norm. That's a norm of Upadharma, and it's also norm for the basis of the Vaishnava compassion.
Thank you for your comments. Usually when we talk about on different subjects, we ask our listeners or viewers to leave some comments, and we open to discussion. But I think in this case, we are quite firm on that. There is no different opinions on this subject.
Yeah, I didn't go into any controversial things. It's all obvious. Everything that I said is quite obvious. It's not. I'm not trying to present one side of the story against another side of the story. There's only one side of the story. So the story of those who suffer from the aggression.
Yeah, as in his recent speech, the Pope mentioned that there is obvious side of people who are suffering. How he said, I have that quote.
Martyrs. He called them martyrs.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I mean, it's quite,
another side is
astonishing
aggressors.
that Pope Francis would speak so much about Ukraine, about suffering in Ukraine, and he has a much larger congregation in Russia, and he's not afraid to voice it. But we, as the society, are so afraid to say anything, calling the blade. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you have to call a spade a spade. You cannot just, say, well, it looks like a spade, but I'm not quite convinced. Those, kind of like a bullshitter kind of philosophy. I'm not quite convinced it's a spade. It could be a spade, or could be an object that resembles a spade. You have to call the spade.
That's
spade.
what exactly is happening now. Honestly, when I hear devotees not officially talking about this,
but why Pope Francis would
how
do
discussion
that?
is sounds.
He has more
We are
compassion
not
than
sure.
What's going on here? He calls Ukrainian nation a martyrs, and he knows where the aggression comes from, and he knows how to talk about the pain of people who suffer. And we are not prepared to talk about it. It's on the bodily platform. Prabhu, we just talk about Bhagavad Gita and worship our gurus, and everything, all the suffering is just irrelevant to our practice. I mean, unbelievable. Considering so many devotees are suffering, I don't get it. Sorry. Anyway, thank you so much, and I have to go, but I was
Okay.
happy to be
Okay.
with you.
Thank you so much, attention order. I think our listeners will get some important points from this presentation, and please subscribe to our channel and listen to our future discussions. And thank you so much for listening. And Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you, Prabhu.